Keith Richards' Sussex country home in Redland is experiencing a frosty night in February 1967. What was meant to be a low-key weekend of hanging out with pals and listening to music became one of the most scandalous evenings in rock history. Headlines exploded the following morning as blue lights flashed and doors were kicked open. Stones are involved in narcotics bust. The fog of LSD and salacious tabloid reports, however, always obscured something suspicious. Theories circulated and fans wondered for decades. Who informed the authorities? On that fateful night in Redlands, what actually transpired? Above all else, was Marianne Faithfull a helpless victim ensconced in a fur rug, or was there something far more planned? Now, Marianne Faithfull broke her silence after years of keeping mum, and her revelations have changed the game. That night in Redlands, things weren't merely a random coincidence. Nobody had the guts to see it through to its conclusion until now, but it was there. It all began in a solitary Sussex house, where paranoia, stardom, and rebellion met. To get a handle on it, we have to go back to the beginning. Keith Richards, the Rolling Stones were the greatest band in the world back then. Not only were Brian Jones and Mick Jagger famous musicians, but they were also symbols of British independence. However, the system sought blood by 1967 due to the increased scrutiny that comes with celebrity. The idea was that Redlands would serve as a sanctuary. Keith persuaded Mick and Marianne Faithfull, along with a handful of other close friends, to go on a city getaway that February weekend. Hashish, LSD, and a lack of clear boundaries made it more than just a social gathering. It was a psychedelic getaway. The tabloids were in heaven when the cops barged in. The notorious detail that troubled them for a long time was the supposed discovery of Marianne Faithfull, who was naked under a fur rug and had a Mars bar on her wrist, an image that would be indelibly associated with the Stones' criminal legend. But behind-the-scenes chatter started up as time went by. The narrative was incoherent. While tabloids splashed with sensational stories, the truth remained hidden. When Marianne Faithfull mustered up the nerve to speak up, the revelations she made shed new light on that notorious night. Instead of merely reliving past experiences, Faithfull deciphered the enigma that had plagued rock music's annals for 4 decades. The narcotics raid in Redlands finally came together, piece by piece. It was treachery, not anarchy or coincidence. No one had the guts to say it aloud except Marianne. Faithfull explained that the evening was never supposed to end in a spontaneous bust in her own words. The plot was well organized and chillingly precise, and the individuals involved were closer than anyone could have thought. Too much drug use, too much touring, or too much employment may have disastrous consequences, but no one could say for sure. Someone in the Stones' inner circle knowingly tipped off the authorities, she said. Someone whose actions are motivated by greed or vengeance. She spoke of clandestine gatherings, escalating tensions, and a paranoid vibe. From within, the treachery had started. The farther she dug, the more distinct it became. Their trap had been laid. The betrayal was also not perpetrated by third parties. It was an internal thing. Old scars were revived by Faithfull's revelations. For a long time, Mick and Keith thought that Scotland Yard had tipped off the media in order to set an example, but the truth was much worse. Many now suspect that Brian Jones, who was growing more and more estranged from the band, was involved in the treachery. His drug and mental health issues were getting worse, and he was harboring pent-up animosity toward Mick and Keith, especially with regard to Marianne. Members of Faithfull remembered the first indications of discord among the church. An explosion occurred that night in Redlands as a result of ego, drugs, and distrust. The band's cohesion was irreparably damaged after it. One man appeared to be the center of it all. He was brilliant, but also frail and falling apart on the inside. Brian Jones was that man. A genius, a visionary, and a founding member. That was Brian. On the other hand, he was profoundly damaged by 1967. Brian started acting out due to his struggles with insecurity, drug dependency, and his diminishing status in the band. His jealousy, according to others who watched, got to be too much. He could no longer bear to watch as Mick and Keith stole the show and his own star faded. His already troubled relationship with Anita Pallenberg had become even more so with Marianne's increasing interference. Brian may have done rashly or spoken to the incorrect person in his attempt to topple the Stone Empire, as stated by Faithfull. But that wasn't the end of the consequences. Even the seemingly unbreakable brotherhood between Mick and Keith started to crumble as suspicions swirled. In addition to bringing the Rolling Stones into legal trouble, the Redlands raid also revealed internal divisions that would plague the group for years to come. Trust between Mick and Keith started to crumble very immediately, as Faithfull made plain. Keith was held responsible by Mick for permitting an excessive number of individuals to attend. Conversely, Keith believed that Mick had failed to defend Marianne during a critical moment. Both sides were filled with suspicion. A once unbreakable bond started to crack under the strain. There was more to Redlands than a raid. A chilly conflict broke out between the two rock behemoths. The establishment pounced as the band started to fall apart, publicly trying to put an end to their rebellion by dragging the Stones into court. The British judicial system wasted little time striking after the bust. Prone to jail time and public disgrace, Mick and Keith found themselves in courtrooms. Each and every detail was reveled in by the media. Since Marianne was the sole female participant, she became a symbol of moral outrage, and conservatives called for harsh punishment. No, narcotics weren't the only issue. It was an accusation, a caution, and an intentional assault on the youth movement that the Stones symbolized. However, Marianne was the one who took the worst hit that night. After that, she experienced more than simply humiliation in public. Few would have made it through the terrifying slide into darkness. The fallout affected more than only Faithfull. The impact was devastating. She was a figure of scandalous ruin almost immediately after becoming a rising star and literary inspiration. She had ceased to be Mary and the performer, the singer, the magnetic stage presence. Forever known as the woman under the fur rug, she was reduced to a racy headline. Circumstances led to her being mocked in print. Her countenance, an object of disgrace. In addition to being believed by millions, the harsh, degrading, and made-up Mars Bar story was ingrained in culture like scripture and overshadowed all that she had ever accomplished. The betrayals were much worse than the lies. Her closest friends and family members, who had found solace in her company before, suddenly disappeared. They did nothing to protect her. They accepted the story without inquiry. They let her to fall. Marianne retreated into herself after feeling humiliated and alone. Her transformation into a heroine was neither exciting nor defiant. It was a last-ditch effort to escape the crushing emotional weight of the public's scorn and my own personal anguish. A realm of darkness and quiet descended upon her. The stages, the raving fans, and the hotel corridors where everyone laughed were all gone. Rather than them, we have needles, withdrawal, and dreadful isolation. The globe progressed. They became legendary, the Rolling Stones. Nevertheless, Marianne was abandoned like a piece of collateral, overlooked, misunderstood, and burdened by the immense weight of their disobedience. When the smoke cleared, everything appeared different. No longer were the Stones defiant renegades. They had a criminal past. As for Marianne, something completely new emerged from her. The Rolling Stones' sense of togetherness and independence was broken at Redlands, a turning moment in their career. Their reputation started to change in the public's view. No longer were they headline-grabbing, naughty rebels. The perverted symbols of a movement that the establishment was eager to stifle were both dangerous and iconic. A more sinister mythos gained hold as the glitz and glamour waned. Subtly but surely, the trust that had once bound them began to crumble as the drug use increased and the laughter subsided. Even more tragic were the repercussions for Marianne Faithfull. Her credibility was not merely damaged, but systematically undermined. Tabloids turned her into a caricature when she was once revered as a mysterious muse and poetic voice. The Mars Bar myth was a nasty fabrication that engulfed her identity and reduced her to a punchline. It followed her around like a tumor on her legacy for decades, even though she denied it over and over. She descended into a pit of misery as the world mocked her. Notoriety abandoned ship. Allegiances waned. Addiction was her escape from the burden of public shame. She used heroin not for pleasure, but to drown out the world around her. The world had made her a symbol of failure, so she disappeared from stages and spotlights, not because she desired to, but because it was expected. In the midst of all the debate and rebellion surrounding the stones, Marianne waged an unseen but deadly battle with herself. Not in a courtroom nor from a journalist, but from Marianne herself, would the truth begin to surface decades later. In hindsight, Marianne Faithfull doesn't express resentment or anger. On the contrary, her memories of the past are crystal clear, and it hurts. She now sees those years through a different lens, one characterized by a hallucinogenic revolt and creative fervor. A deceitful facade concealing intricate webs of control, monitoring, and treachery. The way they were all convinced they were cultural revolutionaries threatening to rock the boat is something she'll never forget. However, the truth is that they were already being watched closely, with not only fans and the press, but also powerful individuals trying to predict their every action. They felt controlled, manipulated, and finally punished. There was more to the Redlands bust than meets the eye. It served as a trap. What transpired after that was all a part of a grand plan to derail the counterculture that the Rolling Stones represented, as she now realizes. That was the beginning of her inner anguish, shame, and addiction. Innocence was more than simply shattered that night. It was the turning point that set in motion decades of internal flight. Marianne isn't just retelling history anymore when she shares her narrative. She is rewriting it internally, finding her voice again, and establishing herself as an eyewitness to a covert conflict rather than a supporting player in someone else's narrative. She never told the truth about the fur rug, the Mars bar, or the humiliation. For decades, she suffered in silence, shame, and the media's fabrications of her story. Finally, she has found it, and her voice is fiery and her eyes are clear.